Welcome back. Today I'm going to show you how to make one of my absolute favorite foods, ramen eggs, or Ajitama if you're feeling fancy. I prefer calling these ramen eggs though, since I don't speak a word of Japanese, and I have a suspicion that I may have pronounced that completely wrong. But since I have no shame and a willingness to try anything once, I'll power through a couple more. Ajitama comes from the shortening of Ajitsuke, which means to season, and tamago, which means egg. Since these are essentially soft-boiled eggs that are marinated in seasonings and soy sauce, the name is very literal, and I like that. Speaking of, don't forget to like the video if you want to help the channel grow, and subscribe for more homemade food. Let's get to it. If you're following along, you'll need as many room temperature eggs as you feel like making. I'm using 5. A pot to boil water in. A bowl of ice water to stop the cooking process. A Ziploc bag or a container to store them in, and marinade ingredients of your choice. Typically, the marinade calls for soy sauce, mirin, sake, and a little sugar. But I've never bought mirin or sake before, and I don't plan on starting now. I'm substituting the mirin for maple syrup because the internet told me I could, and as we all know, nobody would ever tell a lie on the internet. Also, I'm Canadian, so when you tell me I can use maple syrup, I'm going to. I don't actually know what sake tastes like since I've never had it, but so far this leaves me with salt from the soy sauce, sweet from the maple syrup, and the only thing that's really missing here is a little heat. I usually like adding chopped fresh ginger, but it's February and the ginger at the store looks like the shriveled hand of a cadaver, so I've opted to use ginger powder today instead. Since it's a little more mild than fresh ginger, I also added a shot of sriracha for good measure. Really though, you can use whatever flavors you like as long as they complement the eggs. I've made this with chicken soup stock, onions, I've even added nutmeg before, but the only time I found them truly revolting was the batch I made with garlic. Now understand that I love garlic, but something about garlic and eggs was really off-putting to me. Anyway, start by bringing a pot of water to a rolling boil, then add your eggs carefully with a slotted spoon. If you're starting with room temperature eggs, set a timer for 7 minutes to achieve what I would consider to be a perfect texture. If your eggs are still cold, straight out of the fridge, you might need to add an additional 1 minute, or possibly even 2 if you're cooking a lot at once, since the cold eggs are going to drop the water temperature temporarily. I like to roll the eggs around in the pot with a slotted spoon, especially for the first 2 to 3 minutes, as this can help keep the yolks in the center. If you just place your eggs in the pot and walk away, it's possible for the yolks to end up closer to one side, which might result in slightly uneven cooking, or a bad time when you try to peel the shell off. Just be gentle and try not to crack the shells against the side of the pot while they're cooking. After 7 minutes, take them out of the pot and place them in a bowl of ice water. My ice cube trays are currently full of soup stock, so I opted to use a couple ice packs from my freezer instead. If you don't have either, you can put a bowl of tap water into the fridge beforehand, and if the eggs heated up too much, run cold water from the tap into the bowl. The point of this step is to stop the cooking process as rapidly as possible so you don't end up with hard-boiled eggs instead, and also thermally shocking them like this will help the eggs peel a lot easier in the next step. Once the eggs are cool enough to safely handle after about 5 minutes, I like to take a butter knife and crack all the way around the shells, making sure to break through the air bubble at the thick end of the egg, then place them back into the cold water for another 5 to 10 minutes. This makes them a little easier to peel by allowing water to get in between the cooked egg whites and the membrane layer. If you haven't made your marinade ahead of time, now's the time to get everything together. As I mentioned earlier, I couldn't find any edible-looking ginger at the grocery store, so I'm using about a teaspoon of ginger powder, a healthy squirt of sriracha, about a tablespoon of real maple syrup, and enough soy sauce to fully cover the eggs. You could also add a little water if you like, but I like the results that I get with this mixture. Since I used powdered ginger, I'm sealing the Ziploc bag and giving everything a good shake until as much of it is dissolved as possible. It's been about 15 minutes, and the eggs have cooled down enough to safely peel them. I'm sure there are a multitude of different ways that people do this, but you're watching me, so... I always start at the fat end of the egg, where there's usually a small air pocket, and I rip a hole in the membrane layer if I haven't already done so by cracking it with the butter knife. This gives me the perfect starting point every time, and I like to lightly press a thumbnail underneath to separate the membrane from the cooked egg white. The membrane should hold on to most of the eggshell shards, and with enough practice, you can peel it all off in one piece. The first 3 or 4 times that I tried to make these, I found myself rushing just a little too much, and I ended up ripping large chunks of egg white off with the shell. What I've since learned is that this is a sign that your eggs aren't cool enough. If this is happening to you, stop trying to peel them, put them back into the cold water bath, and try again in 5 minutes. Not only will this make them a little easier to peel, taking a few minutes to collect yourself and try again when things aren't going right is usually a good way to pry victory from the jaws of defeat in most circumstances in life. Once your eggs are peeled, place them carefully into your marinade and top up with more soy sauce if needed. If you're using a Ziploc bag like I am, I find the best way to remove all the air is to close the top almost completely, leaving about an inch unzipped, then submerge the bag into a bowl of water until everything but the small opening is below the surface. This forces the air out of the top of the bag while leaving the marinade and the eggs below, and since we already have a nice bowl of water on hand for this step, it seems somewhat obvious to do it this way. Now leave your eggs in the fridge for at least a day. I left these for about 40 hours before filming the next scene, but they'll keep getting more flavorful the longer you leave them, peaking at about 4 days. After that, you can still eat them, but the egg whites may be a little bit rubbery from the salt, so if you plan on eating these every day, you probably want to make them twice a week. I've got a bowl of freshly made instant ramen and some leftover ham from last night's quiche that I'll be adding to it alongside 2 eggs. You can see that there's a small amount of gas inside the Ziploc, and I suspect that that's either a little bit of sulfur dioxide escaping from the eggs, or possibly some carbon dioxide from the fermentation in the sriracha. Then again, maybe there was a little air trapped in the bag when I closed it. Either way, it's not enough to be a problem. I've made these eggs maybe 30 times now, but I still get a little giddy when I cut into one and they're absolutely perfect inside. The yolks are just slightly set and custardy, and they've taken on the flavor of the marinade and become absolutely delicious. If I could only pick one way to eat eggs for the rest of my life, I would pick these every time without hesitation. If you like slightly less set yolks, you could boil them for 30 seconds less. Or if you want somewhat runny yolks, try boiling them for 6 minutes instead of 7. Personally, I like a yolk that doesn't spill out onto my cutting board when I slice them in half, but still has a gooey, custardy center, and I've found 7 minutes with room temperature eggs gives me that result pretty much every time. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to hit the like button and help the channel grow. And if you'd like to see more of my videos, subscribe for more homemade food. See you next time.